Callahan's Corner, where you ask the questions, we answer them live right here on Facebook. Got a doozy this morning. Wanted to jump right in, submitted here via Facebook Messenger here. I'm going to read out parts of the question, actually dive in and answer this question live. But kind of some background on this is, well, actually, I'll dive right into the question. Mike, we're in the middle of doing our audits on the job, like you were talking about on a recent video, and looked at this client's account over the last 90 days. So once again, remember, I'm going to open up the screen and show you kind of what we're talking about here. But when we go in, we do not want to continue to service jobs that aren't profitable. So congrats to this contractor. They're going out and executing some of the tangibles we're throwing out here on Callahan's Corner. So they're doing a 90-day audit on every maintenance account, among some other accounts, I'm sure, but particularly in the maintenance account here over the last 90 days. So they've done this, I believe they're down in the South, possibly Florida. And the long and short of it is he wants no non-selective herbicides applied to his landscape beds. So they're having to actually go out and manually weed it. So I believe, if I'm reading through this, that they haven't been able to keep pace because it is the rainy season starting down there with the heat and humidity. And they're weeding 95% of the property manually, but traditionally it's a non-selective herbicide such as Roundup, where they're actually spraying it and being able to maintain that with a significantly less effect on budgeted time. So it doesn't look like they've actually raised the price on this property, but to accommodate his needs from what they normally do of doing a spraying or spot spraying, they're actually manually weeding the property to get as close as they can near the allotted time. They are at about $33 an hour on this account, and it's actually costing them $45 break even. So they're actually losing the difference between the $33 and the $45 an hour. Their profit, or basically their revenue goal per man hour, is actually $50. So they're about $20 or $17 off their goal. So they're actually losing money on this account. They're getting 33, they want 50, but it's costing them 45. So it's about a $17 per man hour gap here. So their question is, the individual is demanding an on-site visit with a supervisor. They also have a very large backlog of landscape installation jobs, well over a month by the looks of it, and their revenue per hour on their landscape maintenance or their landscape installs is obviously significantly higher and more profitable. Their question is, should they cut him loose? We should billing him 185 to 200 a month to break even, small profit, and they're currently billing 130. So they're at 130. They're saying they should be somewhere between 185 and 200 a month. So let me dive in and kind of put some concept or context to how we kind of should track this. And then I'm going to answer these questions directly. And I've got a couple different options here because we have been through this in my company, the same exact issue here. So basically your client has demanded the contractor to go out and kind of go out outside of the normal standard rating operating procedure for landscape maintenance. They do not want pesticides or non-selective herbicide. So we've gone in and done some manual weeding. So with all the changes in New York State, this is something we have actually encountered. So I'll tell you how we tackled it, or a couple different ways we've actually tried to tackle it here. So I'm going to open up the screen here and just put some context to how did this contractor go out and look at what they should be making versus what they're actually making to make that decision. And if they have any questions, this should clarify that. And then I'll actually jump in and talk about how do we address this frustrated customer that has basically been able to get some services to make them more happy, but it's been outside of our standardized operating procedure or our scope. So no judgment here. Trust me, I have done this myself. So the first thing we're looking at is the contractor is a Simple Growth client. Has been watching these videos and they're going in and doing the right thing. So that is huge step number one. Now, if you haven't seen the video that they're talking about, I want to show you this. So what we should be doing up here up top, we've got crew number one. Let's imagine this is our maintenance crew. So we should have budgeted times, including drive time, for all the jobs. So this crew here fictitiously is budgeted for 20 hours. And we started at 7 a.m., went to 5 p.m. That's a 10-hour day. I'm assuming they'd be running 4 10s based in this scenario. And we got a half-hour lunch for 2 individuals on that crew. So we've got 20 hours, an hour subtracted for lunch, non-paid, So our payroll liability is 19 hours and we budgeted 20 here. So they're actually 1 hour under budget. So if this contractor is fully implementing this, these are the things that would go on the shop wall. And then we're actually going to dial into that specific job where they're generating 33 an hour, but they really need to be at about 45. But this is the first thing that usually will raise a red flag if this property's in here and hurting us so much, even on a daily basis throughout the week. So we've got 105%. So that is how we're putting that on the shop wall or shop TV. 105%. Anything from 100 and above is really good. They're beating their budgeted time. So you can tell the crew, hey, you gave 105% today with a quality standard. You did a great job. Conversely, if I went in and said, hey, we're going to give these guys 19 hours and they did it 19, that's 100% once it's updated. So they'd understand that with a quality standard. And then finally, what we would want to do is say, okay, if we gave them 17 hours and it took them 19, this could be the direct effect. Now, this is probably a smaller residential property, but if you had a large HOA and you're only doing 1 or 2 a day, this could actually pop up and be a red flag that there's a massive issue on this day because we're going outside of scope. We're not spraying the non-selective herbicide. We're going in and manual leading at the customer's request with no additional increase in price. So you could go to the crew and say, hey, you gave 89% today with a quality standard. So this is a public accountability piece that we should be doing daily and reviewing weekly over here with the company as a whole throughout all our crews. Now, going to the question at hand, they're losing money on one specific account. But before we go in and do that audit, we should be tracking on a daily and weekly basis every crew as a whole. Now, the question at hand is they've got lawn mowing and landscape maintenance. Being the southern states, most lawn care companies will do the bed maintenance, some of the pruning, and the mowing all at the same time in one visit. If you're in the north or Midwest, it's a little bit different. We work with hundreds and hundreds of companies across the U.S. This is very normal in the southern state that this contractor is at. So let's assume that this is just the bed maintenance portion. And what we're looking at here is based on the start and top times in a mobile, this fictitious example, not the exact example that was submitted, but basically they're generating $57.30. So in this example, if we had bumped this up to about 67, actually about 69 bucks, that's the difference. They're desiring, say, $69 an hour. They're only getting 57, and maybe it's costing them $60 an operate before there's a profit. So we're losing money on this. So we need to go in and figure out, okay, based on that, what should we actually be charging? So the current price is 54, but based on the revenue goal and the historical data of the last 90 days in the question, they should be going out fictitiously in this example, charging the 165. So I believe in the question, they came up with a billing rate of somewhere on average to 185 and 200. So you want to take the average of those. I'm guessing that's going to come out to about 190, 195 is what they should be charging. So to answer the question directly, there's a couple pieces to this. First is the customer's upset because we've kind of basically gone out of scope to satisfy them, but we haven't been able to actually maintain the property in the same way we would with a Roundup or a non-selective herbicide. So what I would say is we need to just have a communication with them via the phone with a manager. If we decide to keep the client, and if we don't decide to keep the client, let's have that conversation with them. I don't know if it necessarily requires an on-site visit because if they're not going to pay the higher amount, why waste the revenue pulling a manager off your hardscape division when they're generating some revenue, making sure that profit center is going. So first thing is I would call, have a conversation, explain, hey, we made the exception of doing manual weeding. If you want to continue the manual weeding with no non-selective herbicide, it's going to be at that 195 or 200. I would take the high end of that at 200 because the expectation, especially in the season, is going to be pretty tough. So we want to make sure we're covered. We got some extra time. The crew can do a good job, so they're happy. The second option there is if you continue to want to do it, we charge them hourly. Now, this would probably be the way to tackle this, in my opinion, because we're going to take the risk out of it for us. And then that gentleman who owns the house can set a threshold of how much he wants to pay. So we've basically alleviated a billing situation there because, if it's hourly and it takes 3 hours one week and 2 hours the next week, we want to make sure we're covered. So either we raise the price to that 195 or 200 a week, we bill them hourly with a set cap of desired amount that we can go up to each month. And those two options, we would require a credit card on file and a signed electronic contract. So we are covered and we're not going to get a charge back, because a lot of times you'll see that instance in the spring cleanup where the contractor do the work. It's an hourly set amount, and then it gets disputed, and who's left to hang to dry? The contractor. So we want to make sure we're covered there. Now, the third option is basically have a candid conversation and say, hey, listen, we're sorry that you're upset. Let's comp them maybe a visit so we don't get a bad review on Google for the inconvenience. But wash our hands of it. Let's walk away. Let's be honest. Say, hey, we made the exception. You're a great client. We're going to manually weed this. We tried to manually weed your property. But really what we do is we spray non-selective herbicides, Roundup. And in order to get the best quality and predictability like we do on our other hundreds of accounts, this is our process. We deviated the process to try to make you happy and continue to have you as a customer. But unfortunately, if you want to have these beds maintained, it needs to be a non-selective herbicide such as a Roundup. At this point, the gentleman has the ability to stay with you with the standardized operating service or leave you. And that would probably be my top advice, because the problem is when we start to deviate our services that are standard across the whole entire company for one or two individuals, it creates inconsistency. And what people want really is only 80%. Now, not that we shouldn't give them 100%, but if you can give them 80% solid and it's predictable each and every week, and it's a predictable process and it's a predictable quality, they're going to be happy. When we go out, especially myself in the early days, we go out and try to be everything to everybody, that's where we get into trouble. So we want to make sure that we kind of put it back in the consumer's hands, say, hey, listen, we tried to make the exception. Unfortunately, we can't continue this exception because it's not meeting your needs and it's out of scope of what we normally do and do well that you loved. So either you go with the non-selective herbicide for the weed control in the beds, or we kind of part ways and we comp you maybe a mowing for free and send some goodwill. If we are going to keep the customer, the two options here is an hourly charge with the consumer setting a cap of how many hours, credit card on file with signed capture, or the third option, which I like the least, especially around bed maintenance and weeding, as we raise that price, that 195 to 200 that we've seen here that we need based on your numbers, and we move forward and continue it. The thing you need to be careful is job notes and probably before and after pictures through your mobile app to document the process. But you are getting yourself, I think, in my opinion, and I've done this before, is when we get out of the scope of what we do well and what we can train and standardize, when we get out of that, that's where we get into trouble. We start losing money and we start upsetting clients, and the quality is not as good because we're not training to that exact process procedure across all, say, 500 or 600 accounts you're servicing. So that is my take on it. Great question. But I got to give this contractor credit. If you're not tracking your daily and weekly budget versus actual hours and running that audit on those clients, say the middle of July and November, December, in most areas, and be able to raise your dollar per man hour revenue to the penny and make those services apply to it, you're kind of flying blind. So this contractor, huge kudos, way to follow the system. I would say have the candid conversation, either have them accept the standardized service or they don't, and we comp them maybe a mowing to make sure they're at least kind of satisfied and they're not going out on social to kill you. But if you are going to do it, do an hourly with a minimum, signed contract, card on file, we bill it right afterwards, before and after pictures in your mobile. Or the least favorite is raise it to the 195 to 300 or 195 to 200 a visit. Same thing, have them sign off, credit card on file, before and after pictures to protect yourself. Callahan's Corner, you ask the questions, we answer them live right here on Facebook. We'll see you again later this week.